Hi guys, it's Crystal. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys all had a safe and happy Halloween and that everything went well for you that night. Just a disclaimer that these videos are for educational purposes or entertainment purposes only. And if you decide to leave a comment, please no hate. There's enough hate in the world as there is. Let's just try to talk about things because that's what we're here for. I do want to start out by making two amendments to my last videos. The first video, I said that Graham Stewart Northcott's older brother, who was 6 and died of pneumonia, was named Gordon. His name was not. His name was actually George. I just want to clear that up. And I also want to say two things about Granger Taylor. Number one, the place that he ate at was actually called Bob's Grill, not Bob's Cafe. And number two, he left a hand-drawn map on the back of his note for his parents. It was supposed to be to the place where he was launching his ship. I have no idea if anybody actually followed those directions to go there or not. I just know it was hand-drawn on the back. I didn't have enough time to leave this information last time. My kids were homesick, so I just wanted to clear that up as well. Today we're going to be talking about a very interesting John Doe case. Most of the time, when we hear about missing people, we know about the events that led up to them being missing. We know about their family and friends. We know images of what they looked like, their habits, things like that. But in the case of John Doe or Jane Doe, we don't know anything about them. In this case, we know everything about the person that happened towards death and after death. We just don't know who they are. So today's case is about Septic Tank Sam. Unfortunately, that's the name the police gave him. It was not something that I came up with, and that is what he has been known for. This case happened on April 13th of 1977, so it's 43 years old, and he is still unidentified to this day. On October 13th, 1977, a family called the McLeods, it was Mavis and Charlie, they have since been divorced, but they were together at that time, were putting a new septic tank system into their farmhouse. They figured as a way to save money, they were going to go and get the pump from their old farmhouse, which is about 1.6 kilometers away from their new one, so fairly close together. So they went over and opened up the septic tank system and opened up the little hatch that they had there, and were looking around for the pump when, lo and behold, Mavis spotted a gray wool sock. She looked a little further in and noticed a brown shoe, and they knew that a leg was attached to it. Charlie has been described as saying something along the lines of they knew it was trouble, so they immediately called the RCMP. The RCMP came out to the farm, which was abandoned. This farmhouse was abandoned that they used to live in, and it had been abandoned for approximately a year, perhaps a little bit longer. And the RCMP proceeded to use ice cream pails, you know, the big ice cream pails that ice cream stores have. They scooped out the really gross water, smelly, bad water, with the ice cream pails and did indeed find a body. This body was described as wearing a blue Levi's shirt that was snap front, blue jeans. He had a gray t-shirt on underneath of his snap shirt. He was wearing brown fake wallabies, which was a big thing for the case because people were trying to actually research where these wallabies came from, and they were only sold at certain points in time, but it didn't actually help them with anything. He only had the one gray sock as well, and they knew he had brown hair. He had also been dumped into the septic tank, which was 1.8 meters deep, head first. They drove him to Edmonton for an autopsy, and the medical examiner determined that the actual cause of death was that he was shot twice, once in the head and once in the chest. He may have been shot at more times than just this, but that's all the bullet casings and wounds that were made by a gun that were found on him. He had also suffered extensive torture. He was burned with cigarettes and a butane blowtorch prior to death. And because of burn marks on his clothes, which would be on like the sleeves of his shirt and his pant leg, and also his one foot was burned, They figure he was tied to a bed before this happened. He was also beaten, and he was, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, he was mutilated in his genital region very badly. He was very decomposed when they found him. So it actually took the medical examiner a few months to figure out if he was male or he was female due to the extensive mutilation on his genital region. They described him as being 5'6", about 165 pounds. So he wasn't a very heavy guy. Medium height and build is what they would say about him. Of course, like I said, he had the brown hair. I didn't find out if he had any facial hair or anything like that. I would assume because of the decomposition. He was also described as having the burn mark on his foot, and he was had really good teeth. From the teeth and the bones, they could ascertain that he'd actually had an unspecified childhood illness when he was 5. And like I said, they said his teeth were in good condition, and more than likely he'd had recent dental work done. Now, I don't know how recent that would be, but they just said more than likely he would have. It looked like he took good care of himself. They also described him as being Caucasian, but they said that it was possible he could have been Native. They do not think that he is from the Alberta area. This is actually Tofield, Alberta, just outside Tofield, Alberta, which was a very small place. There's only about 12 to 1,800 people living in that place. And it would be about the size of, actually, it's a little bit smaller than my hometown, which is Dresden, Ontario. And Dresden only has 2,700 people. If you guys have ever gone through there, you know it's a relatively small town. So Tofield is a very small town. I did research how close Tofield could have been to the American border, and it looks like it's about a good 53 minutes away. And it's about 45 to 50 minutes away from Edmonton itself. I do also know that there are at least 4 reserves within, well, they said walking distance, but it seems like it would be about an hour away for each of them. I suppose you could hitchhike. So it is possible that he is Native, and Tofield has actually been described as a place with Native roots. So they couldn't ascertain everything about him at this point in time. Nobody came forward to claim Sam. They figured he was an itinerant worker, or like a transient laborer of sorts. They figured he either worked on a farm or he worked in construction. And this is significant because there were power poles and lines going up around the Tofield area at the time. So he could have just migrated to move to in there. I know that they also submitted his teeth to about 800 dentists and in dental magazines Canada-wide, and nobody ever came forward about who this guy was. They did actually dig Septic Tank Sam back up in 1979 to do some further work, and it was actually done by a really famous pathologist, and his name is, well, he's not just a pathologist. He's, I guess the best word to describe him is an anthropologist. You guys may have heard of him before. His name is Clyde Snow. I know he worked for helping identify the missing people in Mexico that were found in mass graves. I know he worked on the JFK case. I know he worked on the Oklahoma City bombing victims. And I also know that his probably most famous case is Dr. Joseph Mengele. He was actually able, using supposition, facial supposition, to find out that Dr. Mengele was dead and buried in South America. And this is Dr. Death from the Auschwitz camp, just in case anybody is not sure who Dr. Mengele is. He loved to test on the Jewish population, mostly twins. He did a lot of crazy experiments to them. He was a very terrible person, but they actually called him the angel of death, but they were able to ascertain that. One more thing that you guys should know about Septic Tank Sam is that he was actually wrapped in a yellow sheet when they found him and secured with nylon ropes. So In 1979, Dr. Snow did conclude that he was more than likely 35 years old, although because they couldn't say and pinpoint it exactly, they still use that he was 26 to 40 years old, but it looks like he was about 35 years old. He was also able to conclude that he was a Native American, or at least had Native blood in him. He was the one that actually helped do the facial reconstruction. Now, when I talk about that, I'm talking about how they used his skull, and they would put little marks to figure out the thickness of his skin and everything else. And they were obviously able to use a brown wig so that they could get a general idea of what Septic Tank Sam probably looked like in life. I know that they also did use facial supposition as well, which is basically superimposing his picture onto other people to see if it matched up. And I will show you a picture of the reconstruction. If you'll just give me one quick second. So this is the reconstruction. I hope you guys can see it. I'm trying to get it so it's not so shadowed. That's what they figure Septic Tank Sam looked like in life. They have actually computer generated more, but they all basically look the same as what this is. I know he was also re-exhumed in 1995 to get some of his DNA, and they re-exhumed him again in 2001, looking for anything that may have helped them out. The police actually were able in, I think it was 95, to give the public more information, such as the fact that he was in the bed sheet, that he was wrapped in the with the nylon, how he was shot, and that the crotch of his jeans were actually mutilated by farming shears. This was done by farming shears before they mutilated the rest of him, in the hopes that anybody in public would know who Septic Tank Sam is. There are 3 theories at least on what happened to Septic Tank Sam. The first one is that he was cheating on a spouse or on a girlfriend. So someone took revenge on him. And I mean, he was an itinerant laborer, so they figure, or a construction worker, and no one has ever come forward to say that they know this person or that they were in some way a girlfriend of this person. I don't know how possible it is that that could have been, but that is a theory. Another theory is that he was killed by a serial killer. Now, this theory could have some credence. Number one, I said he was only 53 minutes away from the States. And in the States, you had people like William Bonin who liked to pick up hitchhikers and do bad things to them and kill them. So like I'm saying, it's possible that an American serial killer could have come over and been looking for someone to kill. It's also possible that he could have been smuggled across the border that way, or that he could have come across the border that way and was killed this way. These things are possible. I know a lot of people say, well, it doesn't seem that close to the border. 53 minutes is nothing. And back then, Border Patrol was not like what it is now. We're talking 43 years ago. This was pre 9/11 and everything. So I don't know how well the guards would have checked. And this is a possible theory. It's also possible that he was killed by a Canadian serial killer. They think this just based on the degree that he was tortured, and that the person that tortured him obviously had done this before, knew what to do, and had done this before. I was looking for Canadian serial killers that were active at that time. The only one I could come up with was a man named Yves Trudeau. I could be wrong, so if anybody else thinks that there's another one, go ahead and say it. Yves Trudeau was actually a founding member of the Hells Angels chapter in Quebec. He mostly worked in Montreal and the Laval area. He was their hitman, and he would know how to do these things. I never found any evidence that he was in Alberta at this point in time, but who's to say someone didn't hire him to get rid of Septic Tank Sam, or someone who looked like him and he got rid of him. I know that Eve, I believe, which we may cover this at some point in time, died in the early to mid 80s. And I think he was in prison when he died. I can't quite be certain on that. Sometimes I mix him up with another guy. But there really isn't a lot of evidence that says he was in Alberta. It's possible, though. Like I said, these things are very possible. Another running theory is that, and this might be the most possible theory, is that Septic Tank Sam was killed for revenge of a different sort. There were perhaps people in town, I don't know if this is true because I don't know enough about Septic Tank Sam, none of us do, that he may have been molesting some of the children in town. And because of this, various members of the town decided to do some Texas justice and torture and kill this man. That could lead to why he was so sexually mutilated, because somebody was taking vengeance out for someone else, a children, a wrong spouse, anything like that. And that is also why no dentist identified him. Perhaps his recent dental work was done in Tofield, and because of this, the dentist wouldn't say anything. There is credence to this. The fact that the whole town is silent, that no one seems to know who this man was, even though they're quite close to this town. It was also stated that he had been in the septic tank for anywhere from 4 months to a year. Now, like I said before, if you remember earlier, I said that the farmhouse had been abandoned for at least a year. So, I mean, that's possible as well. The people would have had to know where this area was. It's rural. So I'm sure you guys have been out in rural places before. If you don't know where you're going, you may not find it. It doesn't seem like this was just a site that somebody came across and decided, oh, we're going to dump him in. It looks like it was something somebody knew. And because of this, it leads more credence to the theory that these were people from town. I mean, any of these theories are possible. Obviously, it could not have been suicide. No one has ever come forward and identified who Septic Tank Sam is. So it almost seems like they were trying to keep a closely guarded secret. But none of us can be certain. It may have been someone that they didn't even know at all. Like I said, he could have been murdered by a serial killer. He could have been done in by anybody at some point in time. I just want to make sure that... that I wasn't overlooking any of my theories. It doesn't look like I've missed any. The last theory I want to talk about is another big possibility, and that's that this crime was racially motivated. Like I said before, there were reserves within the area, at least 4. So Sam could have come from any of those reserves. And like I said, they're pretty certain that he is Native, or at least part Native. In Canada, we do know that racism is still rampant against Native people. It's less rampant than it was at that point in time, but it still exists. It could have been a reason why somebody did this, is that they were racially motivated to get rid of this person. It doesn't account for the shredding or the mutilation of the genital region, but it is possible that this was a hate crime, that somebody hated the fact that he was Native, so they killed him. Tofield does have Native roots, but there are, you know, a lot of other ethnicities. Well, I wouldn't say a lot, probably Caucasian for sure. So it's possible that this was a hate crime. I mean, Natives have not really been treated very fairly in Canada. A lot of Native crimes are not really taken as seriously or investigated as well as they could have. I do know that the officers did try very hard to investigate this. And I'm sorry, I do want to say it was in 1983 that they released the information about the blanket and about the ropes. There are some of the investigating officers who are still alive, and they don't think that the case of Septic Tank Sam is ever going to be solved. Like I said, the original scene that they came upon in the septic tank was not the original crime scene. They knew it wasn't. They didn't find any other evidence, even in the farmhouse, in the fields, anywhere, on the ground, even in the septic tank system itself, that this crime was done there. So obviously, since this was a body dump, and it wasn't an area where people knew where to go, someone can only conclude that the two best theories would be racism or revenge. Septic Tank Sam, like I said, has never been identified, but his DNA was exhumed, or was taken from him in '95 when he was exhumed. It's been entered into the database. No hits have ever come forward. Nothing has ever come forward for that, but detectives that still look into the case do believe this is their best way of identifying who this man can be. And we know that DNA works. We know that genealogical DNA, which is the most useful tool right at this moment, because it identified Christine Jessup's killer. It also identified the Golden State Killer. So someone from his family could eventually submit their DNA, and then we find out who he is. They do feel that one of the possibilities to explain why no one has come forward is that if he was from a reserve, a lot of them are in very remote places, very isolated places. Maybe his family didn't hear, or his friends didn't hear about his death, didn't hear about people looking at him because everything is so isolated. Maybe they didn't have radios, maybe they didn't have TVs. 1977 was a completely different time than now, and things we take for granted now were luxury items at that point in time that some people couldn't afford. So it's possible that his family did not know that he was missing, and didn't file a report because he told them he was going to work. It's all of those things are possible. Regardless of what happened, though, Septic Tank Sam was still a person. And it's very interesting that nobody has ever come forward to claim his body. He is in a pauper's grave in Edmonton. So here's to hoping that at some point in time, this case will be solved and they'll actually find out who the killers are. I say killers because it's been established that there was more than one due to the amount of trauma he had on his body. If anybody out there has any information and you guys have seen the reconstruction, if you think it looks like somebody you know, contact the RCMP, contact Crime Stoppers. It's anonymous, so everything is kept kosher. And hopefully someday soon, we will be able to find out one of Canada's longest enduring mysteries, and that would be, who is Septic Tank Sam? I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and ring the notification bell. That way we can let everybody know what we're doing. I hope you guys all have a great week, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.